move Power Apps Biz Logic to the cloud for better results. Um, Very quickly about myself. Yeah, an 8-time business applications MVP, been around for a while now. And these are my social media handles, so you can reach out to me on any of these in case you have any questions or you need some help. I write my articles on the blog. The URL is also provided here, so you can go up there to look for articles that I write about. Now, moving very quickly to what do I plan to cover in this session. So I uh, have been on this today and I've watched a few sessions before, and so the whole idea. So most of the sessions that I've seen today have been around the low code, no code thing. But one thing very important that Annie presented in her session was the Power Platform is not just about no code, low code, and it's not just for the citizen developers or the IT professionals, but there is a lot of scope and for pro dev for all the advanced functionalities that are required. So in this session, I'm going to cover about some common business logic extension needs. What are the extensibility options that are available today? Azure Functions at the core, and then I'll open up the floor for Q&A. So while I would have loved to include some kind of a demo over here and show some code, I don't think I'm going to have enough time for that. So what I've done is I've actually included screenshots of what it really looks like, and if I get a chance, I can actually switch to VS Code and show some part of the code as well. So going ahead, let's start with the common business logic ask. So like any application, so power even with CDS, or if we talk about the first party apps like Dynamics 365 for sales or customer service, Microsoft does at the platform level, there is definitely certain business logic that has been incorporated. Now, what happens there is this is common business logic, which is going to be applicable to just about any user of the Power Platform. However, when somebody tries to go ahead and adopt a Power Platform, there would be certain specific needs. So, like we saw in the presentations earlier, Microsoft does have the model-driven apps, and yet with Canvas app, you get the ability to design your way of looking at apps and your way of designing apps. So similarly, even though there is some business logic embedded in the Power Platform, there might be need for every organization to design something that is very specific to them. Some of the very common asks that have been there that we have seen in the past few years have been like, some custom logic to be executed when, say, you create or update a record, some kind of a calculation, or you want to do some kind of an integration. So if there's a record that's created in CDS, you want to write it to any third party application, or you want to get it validated with some data from a third party application. Or another common ask has been about executing biz logic at regular intervals. So something like a nightly job that does some kind of processing, some calculation, something that you do not want to do during business hours, or you want to do it at regular intervals. So quite often, while all these years we have been having solutions to these things, they have not necessarily been something that is natively available, and they had some issues that were there. Like, say, for example, for extending custom business logic, we have always had the plugin and workflows. Now, while they worked well when it was about the on-premise days, and we used to install CRM on-prem, and we could just have our plugins registered outside the sandbox on disk, and then you can do anything that you want. But once you started talking about CRM online and execution in within the sandbox environment that Microsoft provides for your DLLs to execute, there started coming in restrictions with regards to the execution time limit. So if there was anything, any business logic that required more than 2 minutes, it would time out. So There was again, if we were looking at these nightly jobs or scheduled jobs, as you can call them, there wasn't a native way to do that, and there was always a hack that we used to do it. Maybe probably use the bulk delete job, because bulk delete was the only thing that is available in CRM that could very cleanly, like you say, no code, low code, just schedule it, and at the given interval it will just execute it. So maybe using that scheduler and getting your custom code executed, that was one of the common ways of getting a scheduler concept incorporated in the Dynamics 365. So uh, what in the next slide, what I'm going to talk about is what are the extensibility options available today, with the focus being on the word today. So traditionally, like I said, there have always been plugin assemblies and workflow assemblies. So these were basically, as a developer, you would create a library, a code library, a DLL, and then you could register it, and this code would reside within your application database, and then you could register triggers. So there were messages, and you could say that you could define which you wanted your custom code to be executed. So again, these worked well. However, there were limitations. Now, if we talk about today and the Power Platform that we have been talking about, Power Platform comes along with Power Automate flows, which is a way to execute BizLogic. You can schedule your work over there. And then again, a very powerful component of Power Automate is basically connector. So if you saw any of the examples in the previous sessions, when they used these actions, when they used the actions in their previous examples, like if Eliza, if you see, she used the predict action of the CDS connector. So it was basically a connector. So you can design very powerful flows based on the connectors that are available to you. Again, Power Automate has like more than 300 or 500, the last count, I'm not sure how many, the connectors available. But if you wanted to create your own custom code and make it available as a connector, then that is what we're going to see today. How to create a custom connector, your own custom connector, similar to something like the CDS connector, the SharePoint connector that you've seen in the earlier demos. And then finally, webhooks. Webhook is a pro dev topic over here. Like what webhook does is, webhook is a way to get, again, similar to your plugins and workflow assemblies, where you registered messages. Now, like I said, in plugins there were DLLs; they resided within the environment. Webhooks, again, your messages, and so you can register a webhook against your triggers. So create, update, you can do, and this time your message and all of the context information is submitted to a webhook, which is actually an external web application that is registered outside of that is hosted outside of the CRM environment. We're going to quickly, I'll do a brief overview of each of this as we move ahead. So let's start with Azure Functions, which is at the core of all the three components that I mentioned here. Whether it is webhook, Power Automate, or custom connectors, it is Azure Function at the core. So what we are going to we'll first look at what an Azure Function is, and see how once you have an Azure Function created and hosted, how you could use this in all of the other three applications that I have just mentioned in the previous slide. So what are Azure Functions? Azure Functions, as I've listed over here, is a serverless computing service hosted on Microsoft Azure. So again, serverless computing service hosted, big word. This, it's just simple a web application or your code, which you don't have to host it on. So traditionally, when you did a web application or you did a website development, you used to have your own hosting service and put your code over there, and that's where it used to execute from. So now with Microsoft Azure and Azure Function, it is a It is a computing service that will be hosted on the cloud. So you write your code and you publish it on the cloud, and that's it. You don't need to do anything beyond that. Microsoft takes care of all the hosting and the environment and all of those details. Besides, given that it is on the cloud, then it gives you the scope for extending the power of your. When I say extending the power, it means that say suppose uh, generally when you host a website, it has a certain bandwidth that it can accept the request for and consume. So if there is a heavy load of request, it could get your website or your service could get slow. So with Azure, if you go about hosting your service on Azure, then you can easily scale up and scale down your service depending on your needs, and thereby control the cost. So you don't necessarily have to start big. You can just start at a really low level that is just enough for your off peak period. And once you have a peak period going where you're going to make many calls for your Azure function, you could basically scale up the service. Now, one of the important things to note over here is that when you're creating Azure Functions and hosting it on Microsoft Azure, you need an Azure subscription, which is not included and is not a part of the D365 subscription. So unlike plugin and workflow, where there was not an additional cost required, and it was you write the code and it is hosted within the application. If you would like to host an Azure service, then you would need to purchase an Azure subscription and host your services on the cloud on that subscription. Now, Azure Functions, there are app service that comes with two subscription models. So one is the app service model, and the other is consumption model. Now, as the name consumption suggests, it is like there will be transactions which will be calculated based, and the cost calculated based on the calls that are made to your function. So if there are no calls made, then the consumption is low, and then your cost for hosting is low. On the other hand, you have the app service model. App service model is good when you want. So app service is a flat fee model wherein it doesn't depend upon the per request that is made, but basically it is a flat cost that is there, and within that flat cost, now you can host your functions, and and Microsoft is not basically going to keep account of the transactions. Now, code resides outside of Dynamics 365. So what this means is when you write a code, when you have traditionally written code in plugins or workflows, you would always get access to the context and the service. So suppose you want it from your, if I'm writing a plugin and I say that on the create of an account, go and create a note. And if I had to create a note record, so I didn't really have to go and explicitly create a service object, because the plugin, my code was being executed within the context of CRM, and plugin gave me the access automatically to the service object service connection, and I could just simply use the service connection and go ahead and perform my create update operations as required, and it would be executed within the same environment in which the code of the plugin is triggered. Now, when I say code resides outside of Dynamics 365, it does not have access to the connection object. This means that you need to explicitly create connections with your create connections and establish connections with your CRM environment on which, or CDS environment on which you want to perform the actions. Now, one of the ways for doing this is creating the application user. So in CDS or Dynamics 365, if you go into your users, if you go to manage users, you will see, and in the view you will see that apart from your normal users, there's also something called application users. So it is a good idea to create an application user. So when you create an application user, you're basically registering an app in Azure, and once the app is registered in Azure, you get an ID and a secret key. So use this ID and create the application user in your CDS, give them a security role. So an application user is like mimicking a normal user, but without using one of your licenses. So you will and then once you create an application user, then you will give the security role. So based on the security roles provided, when I try to establish a connection with CRM using that app user credentials, then I will only be able to perform those operations for which you have given the app user permissions for using the security roles. So again, next is execution timeout limit. So one of the limitations of your plugins and workflow custom code assemblies had been that the 2 minute timeout limit. So over here, the execution timeout limit in case of a consumption plan could be extended to 10 minutes, and if you're talking about the app service model, the default comes with 30 minutes, but you also have the option to reset it to have no time limit, so that you can have it have your custom long running codes execute. Though it's not a very good idea to have any code execute for that long. However, if there is a requirement, there is always an option available for you. Moving forward. Okay, so again, here I have added a very quick a couple of screenshots over here to show what Azure Functions are. So like I said, Azure Function is nothing but it's like a web app. It will have a URL, and you're going to use that URL to access to get your code executed. So this is the URL that you see. Now if you see on the on over here key, now one way to when you've hosted your code on the cloud, you may want to secure your function. That is, since it's hosted on the cloud and it's a URL, it is accessible to absolutely anybody, but you of course don't want it to be open to just about anybody to go ahead and call your API. So one way of securing functions is by providing app function keys. So if you can see on the right side over here, here you have function keys. So you can create a function key, which is like a multi-character key value.
Roohi? Roohi, we can't hear you. Are you on mute? Roohi?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how I
Okay.
went on mute.
Okay,
Did
that's
you
fine.
did you did you miss a lot of it?
No, no, just 30-second maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
I don't know how I went on mute. Let me
that's fine. That's
just,
fine. You can just cover up. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll try to repeat this thing over here. So here when we're talking about Azure function, Azure function, like I said, it is like a web application which is hosted on the cloud, and there is a URL that you see. So if you can see over here, it's a URL. So you can use this URL to call the custom code that you have hosted on the cloud. Now, if you see on the since this Azure function is hosted on the cloud, it is a simple URL that is there. It means that it is accessible to anybody and everybody everywhere. Now, you will definitely not want anybody to be able to call your function and execute it without any kind of security or authentication validation. So one of the quick ways of securing your web function is to create a function key. So if you see on the right side, in the screenshot, I have function keys written. You can see the function keys over here. Now this function key is a so if you can see in the example, code is equal to, and there is this multi-character string that is available over here. So this is a key that you can generate, and you can this will ensure that anytime anybody makes a call to your function, they need to pass this key. If the key is invalid or if the key is missing, then the function will not be executed. So this is one of the easiest way of securing your Azure function. Now in this example over here that I have also demonstrated how in the Azure function that I've created. Now I take a query parameter which says tax code. So now here what this is an example of, say, a custom tax calculation. So out of the box, CDS does not do any tax calculation, and tax is something which is differs with every country and possibly even states and cities, right? It's not the same tax rates are not the same, and depending on the countries, even the tax calculation differs. So this is not something that is available at the platform level, and you may want to write a custom code logic for this. So here is an example that I have done. So in this Azure function, I've created a function called get tax rate. So in the get tax rate, the parameters that I'm requesting for is, I request a tax code. Give me the tax code that you want to get the tax rate for. And then, like I said, since Azure functions are executed outside of the CRM environment, then you need to provide the environment details to which you need to connect to CDS. So because my tax rates are going to be, in this example, I'm assuming that my tax rates are stored in an entity in CRM. So if I want to read the tax rate from there, so I am in the header instead of the query. So I have an example in the header. I am requesting for 3 additional details when the Azure function is invoked. I need the URL. This is going to be the CRM URL, and then the client ID and secret. Client and ID and secret is the ID and the secret of the app that you have registered in Azure, and the one using which you have created the application user. So hold on, let me just quickly switch over here. So here you can see that this is my uh, Azure function, and this is my first API function, that is get tax rate. And here I have passed all of the details. So it has my environment details, and there is, I've created an entity, and there's a tax code over here which says taxable. Now if you see in this environment, after I have uploaded I will also switch to the code quickly. But as you can see over here, that in this screen, once you have published your function, you can easily test your application. And then you can, if you've written debug information and you want to just check and make sure that everything is working fine, then you also have the log view right over there for you. So let me just quickly run this over here. And while this is running, I will also like to switch to this app. So I have just opened this my code in VS Code. So I'm not going to execute it, but basically I just wanted to walk through and show how it runs. So when you create now your when you create an Azure, so this is an Azure function that is an HTTP trigger. So if you can see, there are multiple triggers that are available, and I have created an Azure function that can be triggered using an HTTP request. So it's an HTTP request with get post, and here, so here is my the details that I passed over there. So there is the CRM URL, client ID, secret. And now, so in Azure Functions, you have V1 and V2 of Azure Functions. V1 was the old style which used .NET assemblies, and V2 is the .NET Core. So now, very recently, as recently as probably last month or something, Microsoft has released the alpha release of the .NET Core assemblies. So now, using these .NET Core assemblies, you can establish connection, and these .NET Core assemblies work very similar to our old school .NET assemblies that were there. So it is the same connection, simplified connection string that you used to do in the old days. You do the same thing over here. It is just that it now supports .NET Core for you to be able to create V2 version of your Azure functions. So if I go back over here, okay. I think I didn't refresh the screen, so probably this is the screen has timed out. But when you run it, you will get the output as the tax rate that I have passed. So if you can see in the code over here, it returns a tax code. Okay, so it is going to return a tax the tax rate, and then just to demonstrate how a JSON value is returned, I have also included is product taxable. So there are two properties that this JSON is going to include: the tax rate and the is product taxable. Two values are going to come through, and it is going to be returned as a JSON object. So now uh, uh, so here we have the Azure functions covered. Now let me go and show you how, once your Azure function is hosted, how we can go about and consuming it in both low code, no code platform as well as pro dev platforms. So over here, custom connectors. So like I said initially, connectors are the base of your, if I can use the word base, it is an important component and base of your Power Automate flows. When you design flows and you want to perform operations, the how flexible and extensible flows you can design, or how complex flows you can design, depends on the connectors that are available and the operations that they allow you to do. So while there are already many connectors that are available, that have been made available through Microsoft as well as third party ISVs, you yourself can create a connector for your own custom logic. So similar to, so instead of, rather than creating a plugin, you could create an Azure function, and now we are going to create a wrapper. So custom connector is nothing going to but a wrapper around the Azure function that I have hosted on Azure. So what happens with custom connectors is, now if you have a custom connector created, your your low code, no code users, citizen developers can easily use this connector without having to know what is an header and how to pass values within a header, what is a JSON. They don't need to know any of this information. You have created a very end user facing wrapper around Azure function that is there, and they can very easily consume it. So again, like I said, it can be consumed again through Power Apps. So even through a Canvas apps, if you know, you can make a you can add a connector and call an action of the connector directly from your Power App. So if I were creating, so in the morning where we were doing that, we saw a demo of mixed reality and placing of a shelf. So if you were creating some kind of an ordering application and you wanted the tax to be calculated and you want the tax value to be read, then you can easily create a connector out of it, and from your Canvas app you can make a call to your connector, and it will return the tax information for you. So this is about your custom connector. Again, I have a screenshot over here of what a custom connector looks like. So if you go to make.powerapps.com, under data, you would see an option for custom connectors. Now when you custom connectors, now either you could start as a blank template and put in all of the information, or you have the option of creating a connector using a template from Postman. So Postman is a developer is a tool that most developers use to test their application. So you can very easily, I did not pull up Postman over here, but it is a testing tool. You can put a URL over there, put your get information, whatever parameters that are there, and click test, and it will immediately return you the results. So the results that you get from there and the message that you have generated, you could Postman allows you to save the request. So once you have saved that request, that same request file can be used over here to create a connector, and I will actually show you how that is done as well. So once that is done, you don't really need to enter any information. So you can see that from the get tax rate function and the API, that URL that I had, it has automatically created one action, and now I have to give information about this particular action. So it starts with, again, here in the screen I'm talking about the technical information. Again, I don't need to fill anything. When I use the Postman collection, it automatically reads and fills in all of the information. So this is the URL that is there. These are the query strings that had passed. So code is the API key that I talked about. App function keys that I said, that will secure your function. And tax code is the query string that I had said, where you pass the tax code and I will return the tax rate for you. So I have the screen open here. So hopefully I just opened this few minutes back. So this should work. So now, like I said, if you go to custom connectors and click new custom connector, either you can create from blank, in which case you go, if you're a pro dev and you know everything, type your URL, create your parameters and everything, query string, everything on your own. Or you, these are the other ways that you can automatically import and get your connector started with. So here I'll start with this. Say tax demo is the name of my connector. When I click on import here, this is a Postman JSON file that I had exported and I've kept. So if I click on open and I say continue, now here is your general information. So what do you want to call? What is the image do you need to use for your connector? The background color, the description, and things like that. You could provide all of that information over here. Now, what it has picked up automatically from my JSON file is the URL at which my where the base connector is going to be hosted. My Azure function is. Again, next, if you go to security, now there is a basic authentication API key OAuth 2 .2.0. So you can use this. In my example, I have just kept no authentication. I'm going to use the code over there. Function keys to simply authenticate my thing. But if you were something like, if you're using a graph API or something and you wanted your AAD information to pass over, you could definitely use OAuth 2. So if you had provided any authentication over here, when you use the add connection to this connector, when you add the connector, it will prompt you to enter the authentication information. If you're authenticated, it will proceed further. Now, moving forward to the definition file. This is all of the information. So again, this is general information summary that you can just delete and type some information that describes what your function does over here. So operation ID is a ID. So get tax rate CDS. Okay, so this is your action name. So when you add this connector in Power Automate Flow or something, what is the action name that is going to show, action code that is going to show up? That is what operation ID. So give a unique operation ID over here, and if you see, based on my JSON file, it has automatically got the code and the tax code, also the header information, because I had provided that in the Azure, that header information is also required for establishing connections. So all of this information comes automatically. Go to the next, and here's your testing screen. So if I have to first click save, once I save it over here, I will be able to automatically test. So as you can see, creating a connector is super easy. It's just like, again, it is a power user thing. If you hand over somebody one of your Postman JSON export, so this way we have a connector ready. Now once the connector is ready, we can now consume this in a no code platform. So let's next move to Power Automate Flows. So Power Automate Flows, as you say, it gives support for event based triggers, as well as one of the good things about it is it also supports on demand execution. So if you wanted somebody, if you didn't want it to be trigger based, but rather have a user manually trigger this information, then that is possible as well. uh, so you have Mano, can you just tell me how much I am on time? I think I'm over time already.
Yeah, Ruhi, 10 minutes.
Yeah, so sorry, so let me just very quickly show up over here that now that the connector is ready, now that the connector is ready, this connector is now available for you to use. So because you have, again, you created a connector in your Power Apps over here, you've created a connector in this environment over here. Now, if you're designing the flow in this environment, and when you click, so you see this is my connector, and if I select this connector, then this is my action. So using this, when I select this action, again, it is just this. So it is basically hiding all the complicated part of, or the product part of it, and it has just given you simple information for you to, for end users or power users, to fill in the information and make and just go about using it. So yeah, so this is what I wanted to cover in my session, that Power Platform gives you the capabilities to extend. It's not just all about no code, low code, but there is you can pro devs can actually come in, and how the better together story can be done between a low code, no code, and pro code logic. So yeah, that is all that I had to say. Thank you, and I'm sorry for going overboard. I'm really sorry about that. These are my coordinates and information, and please take a couple of minutes out to please fill in this survey. And thank you so much. And